All right, for starters, you want to start off with a box, paper cut. I'm sorry, not a box, that's a square. So a paper cut into a square, and then I personally I wanted to divide the square up so then I can create straight lines across it so it could give me the most symmetrical heart that I could possibly get. You really don't have to do that. See, I divided it into six. I'm sorry, at the 6 inch mark, 3 inch mark, and the 9 inch mark. My square being 12 by 12 inches. But you really don't have to do that at all. You can free draw a heart. You can make it have swirly ends if you want. It just complicates it a little bit, and I did want something very symmetrical. I didn't want it to get too complex on me, but that's what you see me doing right here. You see me dividing it into different sections so then I could create lines to guide me when I was searching for that symmetry. Now, the effectiveness of this is questionable. Ultimately, I do think I came up with something fairly symmetrical, and I think that these lines helped me. Maybe not all of them, but some of them certainly helped. And you could do this if you want. If you think that it'll be helpful, you don't have to do this at all. Just make sure that you get a heart in paper form. Now, the paper itself is important because we're going to use it to outline the heart multiple times on cardboard or poster board. Cardboard will be effective for the top and the bottom of your heart, but you really need a more flexible poster board to create the walls of your box. The top and bottom can be as hard as you want. Now, really, in order to create a symmetrical heart, I wouldn't be able to create a perfect drawing, so I decided to do what we've done many times, is just fold the paper over, make sure that the corners meet as well as you can have them meet, and then cut it, and that gives you your best shot at having a nice symmetrical heart if that's what you're looking for. That being said, this could also work with multiple shapes. It doesn't have to be a heart shape, it could be a star shape, but of course the more complex the shape, the longer this is going to take. Here's the next part that I just discussed with you, which is outlining it on a poster board. This is a poster board that you could get at any art store. You should be able to get something similar to it. And this is a pretty thick poster board. And you're going to need several materials, including poster board. Regular long sheets of paper are helpful. We'll discuss more of that in a minute. A Sharpie is nice. And you see that I outlined it here on the edge, and then I used the other edge. These two outlines are meant to represent the top and the bottom of your box. The first one I did was going to be the bottom, and then the second one I did in Sharpie, and that should be the top. Now, I did make up, I wouldn't call it a mistake because I did have a workaround, but it would have been easier if I had used the brown side of the cardboard. So if I had used the brown side of the poster board here, then it would have been a little bit easier because I later had to go back and adjust because I wrote on what would be the top of my box. And ideally, you don't want that. Now, if your paper has two sides that are both white, which is more typical of a poster board, then that's fine because you could just use the other side. But my paper is a little bit thicker and it has a brown side and a white side. And if I had just kept the white side clean, then it'd be easier to decorate later. Now, this is very important. That initial drawing is not going to be the one that we cut. We are going to create another heart around that initial drawing. So that is going to be the reason or what we cut. The reason I'm using the Sharpie here to outline it a little bit thicker is because your top should be a little bit larger than your bottom. And when I draw that second heart, I'm going to use a blade to cut from the line to the edge. And that's going to allow me to start building the wall for the box. Now, you got to be a little bit wise here in how wide you make it for the top, especially because too loose and it won't fit your box, and too small or too similar to the bottom and it won't go over. So I try not to overdo it, so I just thicken the line a little bit and you'll see, hopefully this will make a little bit more sense to you now in a moment. Here's another thing that I should have done a little bit better is this second heart that is drawn around the first. Make sure that you have enough of a gap there you can always cut that down later. Of course, don't go crazy with it. Don't make it super big. But in some areas of the top heart, that gap between the original heart and the outline was a bit too small. And I mean, it wasn't a big deal at the end. It would have just been a little bit easier if I had made that gap a little bit bigger. It would have given me a little bit more room to work with. Again, cut out around that outline, not your original heart. You want to keep the outline like this. Get a utility knife or an X-Acto knife, and from the top corner and the bottom corner, you need to cut a straight line from your first heart to your second heart, or from the original outline to the outer outline. That straight line is very important. If you don't do that, then it's not going to have those sharp edges that are typically necessary to create a heart like this. And then the other cuts, you see the other cuts can be more random. And when you're doing the top, this is why I made the line thicker on the outside, of course. Make it thicker on the outside. Don't make it thicker on the inside. And right from the edge of that marker, that Sharpie, I started making my cuts. And this will, ultimately it worked out, but hopefully this will provide that little bit of extra space that you need, so the top heart actually functions as a top for your box. This is an open box, so this is the top of it. It's not a closed box. If it were a closed box, then you can make them both the same size. But that, I don't know, what's the point of having a closed heart-shaped box? Maybe for a presentation, or maybe a display like for a Valentine's Day dinner on the table or something. That might work. But the purpose of this one was actually for my daughter's some type of presentation they're doing for Valentine's Day. This is also very helpful. This is a flathead screwdriver, and I used it to score along the first outline of both of these hearts, the top and the bottom. And that, like you see me doing there, is going to help me lift it up, and it'll help you as well. Now, it doesn't have to be a flathead screwdriver. You could probably do this with any tool, a regular screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, even a pen, and just, scoring that line. And the way that I'm able to tell where I need to score is because of those cuts that I made. So you can't see it on the video very well, but those cuts that I made, I just connected all the ends, like a connect the dots type of situation. And this helps immensely when it's time to start creating the wall of the box. You can see how easily it comes up. You can't really see how difficult it is to lift without it, but you can imagine, like, this scoring really does help a lot. For the tip, you're gonna have to do like a little 90-degree angle to make sure that it's not weird. Like you want that corner to fold. It's a little bit difficult to see in the sped up video, but and I did cut it flat there. If you are doing this in class, then just come and talk to me, and I'll help you figure it out. If not, just there's a little extra fold that you have to create in order so it folds nicely with itself. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's also not something that can't be like corrected later with a simple cover up. A lot of, and this is the way boxes are made, especially these decorative boxes, you have like a lot of extra stuff covering up the seams, so it just looks neater. And that's pretty common in this type of thing, I've come to find, and houses too. You really start to realize how much of your baseboard is really used to cover up gaps and stuff like that. But yeah, you see how easily this comes up now that the edge has been scored. Sometimes that blade didn't go all the way through, so that's why you see me occasionally cutting a little bit extra with the scissors. The blade was possibly dull. And here's what I was talking about making that little extra corner right there in order to make sure that it's pointy. Yeah, lift it up. Now this isn't gonna stay up by itself, and this is why you need like a long sheet of paper. And luckily I had some paper on hand that I was able to cut using the cutting board. If you don't have this long paper on hand, I think that a wrapping paper works really well. So maybe if you have a decorative wrapping paper left over from Christmas, or if you have a decorative wrapping paper for Valentine's Day, it would work pretty well. And you could use a pair of scissors to cut a long strip, a long 1-inch strip. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I used a half of an inch. So a half of an inch strip. And then I put that right along the edge with this PVA glue. Now this is a bookbinding glue, but you don't need to use this bookbinding glue. Elmer's glue would work. Just remember that when you do use Elmer's glue, it's really not meant to be used in large globs. Do a very small amount, because typically Elmer's glue is meant to glue pieces of paper together, and it really works well for what it's intended when you use tiny bits. You know, you don't want to use large globs that take forever to dry. Oftentimes we do that thinking that it will create more strength, but that's not really the case when you're doing two pieces of paper. And PVA glue isn't really intended to glue like two pieces of wood together. Even wood glue is reinforced with like nails and things, so nobody just relies on wood glue to glue two pieces of wood together. Once you got your strips up like that, then the beginning of your walls will begin to stay up, and you can see how that works here. Luckily, my bottom and my top did fit into each other. It took a little bit of wiggling around and trying to figure it out. And it may do that. I haven't figured, well, I could be very precise and maybe it'll be a perfect fit, but for a quick project like this, I don't know, it's just kind of for fun. I guess it's not too much of a hassle to just wiggle it around to get it to fit one on top of the other. Now for the walls, here, I cut these 7-inch long pieces of the poster board that I'm using. And that could be as long as you want it to be. It could be 4 inches, 8 inches, 10 inches. I guess the longer you get, the more difficult it is to keep it stable. And there are things that you can do to work around that. But 7 inches is plenty, maybe too much, especially depending on what you plan on putting in there. I was saying before that really this project is for my daughter. I think there's meant to put some Valentine's Day cards in it. So it's really like a box meant to hold cards and whatnot. For you, it might be to hold chocolates, to hold roses, to put a teddy bear in. I think all of those would be good uses for this type of thing. I wanted to do this, but I had to cut a little bit of the paper there so that my wall could go through and it could be as straight as possible. And you'll see me cut just a little groove, let's say, so that I can lay this paper flat in there. You may have to do the same thing, and then I glued it later. There I go. I'm just going to cut right there. And now that paper will fit much more comfortably in there. Right there. What you see there on the edge is the charging cable of this. I've used my cell phone to record these videos, and my phone was running out of battery, so on the left-hand side, that's what you see. I love this PVA glue. This one is a little bit expensive. Like I said, Elmer's glue works really well. This PVA glue does dry really quick, and I find that it's pretty strong. Yeah, for this part, you want to use your whole hand to kind of push out to the edges. Now, I did go back in later and reinforce it with hot glue, but yeah, if you don't use too much glue, it should dry relatively quickly. And this video is only a little bit sped up, so maybe 3 times the amount of holding that you see in the video is what I actually held. You could use hot glue here, but you do run a danger of kind of it getting bulky on you. Hot glue does have a lot of bulk. And you see, because of that groove I cut, it fits really nicely right there. And then it's pretty easy to bring that back end into the mix. But for starters, that's not a bad, it's not that bad. Yeah, you see me going with the hot glue. Here we go. We're gonna have to fold that piece there to create that sharp point for the heart. So to create that sharp edge, I just use a ruler, and that ruler is just gonna help me keep it straight, and then I'll fold it, right? And then I'll bring that in just like that, you see? And then I'll finish gluing up the bottom there. There you go. And I'm just gonna use that ruler to help press that glue against the edge and to reinforce my wall with my initial little wall made out of little tabs with my bigger wall. It'd be the same process with different shapes. You just have to, depending on the shape, you can see how complicated it could become. Another possible use for just like a heart would be decorations for events, maybe a baby shower, wedding, but of course you would need, maybe if there's 10 tables, you have 10 hearts, one for each table, or whatever the theme of the wedding is, or the baby shower is. Baby showers, you do kind of like animals sometimes, or maybe even a children's room. It could also possibly go on the wall with lights. There's lots of potential uses for something like this, but they're all decorative in nature. All right, like I said, the first piece wasn't quite big enough. The second piece is a little bit easier, but it's too long, so I need to trim it down so I can get it to fit into that, in essence, that mold that I've created of the bottom of the heart. Use glue. Remember not to do too many globs. You see how I just did a thin kind of strip, I guess, or bead. And make sure that is glued together, and then right along your edge, and you're mostly done. There are some seams that we have to cover up, like for all of those little tabs down there. So just to make it look a little bit neater. And luckily it doesn't end up being perfect here, because I think if it was perfect and relative size to the bottom, it would have been much more difficult to fit my top on. I did end up doing kind of a reinforcement heart to stabilize a little bit, because you see the edges bulge out. The longer your walls are, the more your edges will bulge out like that. 7 inches, I don't see 7 inches is a bit long, but I did need this to hold Valentine's Day cards, and that's why I did that. I cut off the excess right there with a blade, and like I said, you're mostly done here. Of course, always be careful if you're going to use a blade. If you're a student, make sure you use it with your parents to make sure that you are safe if anything does happen to you, under the supervision of your parents. Here we are. We're going to cover up these seams just with a strip of poster board. I'm showing you how that goes on. I believe I did use hot glue for this. It was just a little bit faster in this situation. And this was like a one-day project. You could do more if you cut out more pieces at one time. That would probably be the best way to do it. And this seam is going to go for the top and the bottom. I had to take it a step further. Now you see that that actually says top. That's not very nice to look at. So I had to do an extra step to make sure that it didn't say top. Yep, like that and like that on the outside. And do it for the bottom as well to cover up those tabs. And that's a box right there. That would be enough, I think, especially if it's a one-time use. You want to put a teddy bear in there or something. I wanted to take it a little bit further, and so I put a little bit of this reinforcement on the insides again, so those walls don't bulge out so much. It's just easier to put the top on. And also I put a little bit of tape on those tabs so they don't get caught. This is on the top. And I'm going to cut out a sheet of paper just to cover up the top, just like that, so then it doesn't show. Well, thanks guys. Thanks for watching.